The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.
Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mutale Nkonde. I am the CEO and founder of AI for the People, a nonprofit in the United States that's focused on advancing policies that reduce discrimination and advance fairness at the national level, at the multinational level, and at the company level. It's my pleasure to moderate today's discussion. And in ways of kicking us off, I would like to welcome to the virtual floor, Dr. Bilal, ITU's Deputy Director of Standards. Dr. Bilal, over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and hello everyone, and deeply honored to have the opportunity to deliver the opening remarks for this discussion. We're here today to address a topic that not only resonates within the sphere of artificial intelligence, but also impacts broader social and economic development. The issue at hand is the eradication of racial discrimination in all of its forms, and especially bias against people of African descent. Our discussion unfolds within the broader framework of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These goals emphasize reducing inequalities and empowering communities, a mission that is more relevant now than ever before. At AI for Good, we are keenly focused on the development of AI that benefits everyone and leaves no one behind. This means that ensuring AI algorithms are fair, unbiased, and explainable. We have hosted dozens of discussions on the topic of trustworthy AI, bringing communities and researchers together to advance explainable AI and address the issue of algorithmic bias. We know that AI systems have the ability to reflect existing inequalities and can exacerbate them if we do not account for the training data that feeds the systems. I look forward to today's discussion in partnership with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Now that we are just 1 month away from the AI for Good Global Summit, we count on our UN partners to bring these relevant discussions to a global audience. We will have sessions on this exact topic, so I encourage those interested to join the summit taking place in Geneva, Switzerland, May 30th and 31st. In addition, at the ITU Standards Bureau, we have an initiative called Bridging the Standardization Gap, a significant endeavor led by the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, which collaborates effectively with developing countries to access and participate in the development and implementation of standards. As we know, we can't develop systems in silo. We need the participation from all segments of society to ensure its effects and helps to build a digital world free from bias. Today's webinar has convened a panel of distinguished experts, all renowned in the field of AI. They will lead us through an exploration of the impact of AI bias, particularly concerning the human rights of people of African descent. The conversation will not limit itself to analyzing the challenges, but will also extend to proposing practical, actionable solutions that can forward the rights of individuals. I look forward to the insightful discussion that will undoubtedly emerge from this session. Let's engage, learn, and take significant strides towards a world free from racial discrimination, empowered by the potential of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Dr. Bilal. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then each will speak for 7 minutes. And during their sessions, I encourage you to post questions to the neural network so that we can be in discussion afterwards. The first panelist I'm going to introduce is Haley Ramsey-Jones, Director of SOCO GACAI and formerly at the Office of UN Affairs in Switzerland. The second panelist I'm going to introduce is Dr. Nashlie Sephus, Principal AI and Machine Learning Evangelist at Amazon Web Services. Both their pronouns are she, her. I'm looking forward to their contributions, and I invite you, Haley, to come forward.
Thank you so much, Mutale. I'm really pleased to be here today. So I'd also like to thank the organisers for putting on this very important event and inviting me to speak. As you've heard, my name is Haley, and amongst other things, I'm a disarmament campaigner. I'm particularly interested in looking at the human rights and social justice perspectives in disarmament and applying an intersectional anti-racist analysis to different weapon systems and to my campaigning generally. So today, I want to talk specifically about bias, especially when it comes to autonomous weapon systems. So as we'll hear, there are numerous examples of algorithmic bias being present in big data. With the commercial application of big data, we are increasingly being sorted into categories and stereotypes. And depending on the application, racial biases can result in relatively benign outcomes, and some may even argue quite useful outcomes, such as advertising Black hair products to Black women. However, there are also some very sinister categorizations that often work against people of color. For example, when applying for mortgages, insurance, jobs, as well as decisions being made about school grades. And we saw this in many countries during the COVID-19 lockdowns, but also on bail, recidivism, custodial sentencing, housing, predictive policing, and so forth. So these negative consequences, or these automated harms, have been described as digital dehumanization and can have devastating effects on people's lives. Unfortunately, with the advances in artificial intelligence, specifically in the area of machine learning, there is a trend towards increasing autonomy in various functions of weapon systems. And to put simply, creating machines that can decide whether or not to kill. The trend towards more autonomy in weaponry without adequate human oversight is alarming, especially as we know that digital technologies are not racially neutral. So when we apply bias AI to autonomous weapon systems, long-standing inherent biases pose an ethical and human rights threat where some groups of people will be vastly more vulnerable than others. In this regard, autonomous weapons would not only act to further entrench already existing inequalities, but could also exacerbate them and lead to deadly consequences. So if we look at facial recognition systems, for example, although companies creating these systems are aware of the biases in the training data, they continue to sell them to state and local governments who then deploy them for use on members of the public. Big Brother Watch, a UK-based civil liberties organisation, famously launched a report on the London Metropolitan Police as having a dangerously and inaccurate facial recognition system. At the time, it misidentified more than 98% of people who attended the London-based Notting Hill Carnival, celebrating Caribbean music and culture. But even if we were to get facial recognition to an almost perfect accuracy, facial recognition for the purpose of identification is still hugely problematic as it relies on huge data sets and images that have been scraped, often without your consent or knowledge, violating your right to privacy. And then perversely, these can be used against you, especially if you're a person of color, as we saw in the Black Lives Matter protests, and we continue to see now in solidarity protests for Palestinians. These systems, initially developed for military use, end up being deployed in everyday policing, border control, protests, and peaceful assembly. So whether neglect is intentional or unintentional, these types of applications of AI are failing people of color intersectionally at a disturbing rate. Not only do they reproduce inequalities, but they actually replicate and amplify discriminatory impact. So, for example, when individual police officers express racial bias, it leads to discriminatory cases. Introducing AI with a racial bias risks amplifying discriminatory cases to unprecedented speed and scale, further marginalizing and excluding social groups that have been historically, racially, and ethnically discriminated against. AI is part of our daily lives, and it has the potential to revolutionize societies in so many positive ways. However, there is a long history of people of color being experimented on for the sake of scientific advances. We see recent examples of this in surveillance culture, but also in maternity health. In the 19th century, James Murren Sims, known as the father of gynecology for reducing maternal death rates in the US, performed gruesome and painful experiments on Black women. Today, the maternal death rate for Black women in the US is 3 times higher than it is for white women. It's almost 5 times higher in the UK. This shocking reality where science is inflicted on communities of color rather than aided by it is still an issue today, and it must be addressed, especially when these technologies are being weaponized. Another area of concern in terms of autonomous weapon systems is the accountability gap. Holding those responsible for unlawful killings by law enforcement and the military is already a huge challenge. However, this issue would be further impaired if the unlawful killing was committed by an autonomous weapon. Who would be held responsible? The programmer, the manufacturer, commanding officer, or the machine itself? Automated violence by these weapons would make it even easier for people of color to be at the mercy of unlawful killings and far more difficult to obtain justice for victims of color and their families. So who controls these technologies, and what do they think they understand about the populations that they are categorizing? American-founded internet giants dominate the global technology landscape. This is not a diverse set of people from diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, genders, ideas, and value sets that are being exported here. Rather, it tends to be a narrowly defined group of mostly white, cis, heteronormative men. What's more, tech companies are not beholden to human rights or democratic processes. They are driven by profit and beholden to their state shareholders. And despite the incredible potential for tech to harm individuals, there are very few laws placing limits on the ways in which tech is used by companies, institutions, or states. These tech companies, by and large, are left to self-regulate. So it's important to stress that the nature of systemic racism means that it's embedded in all areas of society. AI too is quietly creeping into everything. So the effects and impact of this type of oppression will not easily dissipate. So this is why we cannot allow AI advances to go unregulated and quietly permeate every element of our lives. We must be vigilant and guard against building deeply rooted social problems further into our technical infrastructure. We must work towards stamping out racism and other biases in tech and not weaponize racism and bias in tech. So my organization, we are working with many other NGOs and governments and academics to work for a ban on more autonomy in weapon systems. We want to see regulation and a new international law that adequately deals with autonomy in weapon systems. I'll end my presentation now, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is Dr. Nashlie Sephus. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right, and I'll let her introduce her organization and affiliation. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Haley. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm Dr. Nashlie Sephus, and I am a principal AI scientist for Amazon Web Services. I also am a founder of a nonprofit based in my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi, where we do tech trainings and upskilling for people in the community, a majority Black city there. We've been around for over 5 years. And so today I'm going to delve into some of the role that I have taken on in these positions and how that applies to fairness, biases, responsible AI, and what I've seen in the industry as well. And I want to make sure my time. Okay, yeah. All right. So I have a very unique story. I grew up in a house full of women, and so we built everything. We fixed everything. We had had opportunity to have very hands-on for a lot of things, even my first computer, and that was out of the norm for someone in my community. And I remember everyone would come to me to get computer help. And that was something that I just kind of grew in. And I remember our first computer was it was a big chunky computer, and it had, a floppy disk and dial up. And you think about how far we've come since then. We had a different set of challenges then than we have now. But one of the reasons why we've been able to advance their computing so much since then is because of, one, cloud computing, being able to store a lot more data, and two, being able to transport data a lot quickly than we have in the past. And if you think about it, AI at its core requires a lot of data. It requires training data, it requires looking at models, and even testing and evaluating systems requires a lot of data, requires transporting data and running experiments. And so that is essentially what I do in my role. And of course, as a principal scientist at Amazon, I actually am on the responsible AI team, where we focus on auditing all of our systems. We have over 200 AI products at AWS, or Amazon Web Services, and we have over 1 million customers. And so when you think about that level of scale with a product, one, we want to make sure we're educating our customers as well as ourselves internally on what more could we be doing for responsible AI, and look at it as what we call a shared responsibility model. And so it's not only on the burden of the technologists, it has you have to educate everyone, from the person who collects the data to the person who is the upper level management. Also, your customer has to be educated, and not just the customer, but the end user of that product, which isn't always the customer directly. And so, given this, I've been a part of the team to put together a framework for Amazon, which, if you don't know, Amazon uses AI everywhere. We ship over or sell over 4,000 products per minute on the Amazon store. And it's not even including our AWS services, which has customers from the entertainment industry, customers from healthcare industry, customers in fintech. And so we ship about 1.6 packages every single day. We also have our Alexa tool, and there's a technology called Just Walk Out, where you can go into a Amazon Go store or a similar store and pick up technology and just walk out, and it all uses cameras and computer vision. And so even not even considering AI on a broader sense of people using it for their own applications and generative AI, there's just so many applications even internally at the company. And so we try to look at it from a holistic standpoint of responsible AI. And so we actually categorize responsible AI into 8 different categories. And so one, of course, given generative AI is now in the hands of so many people, even my grandmother knows what AI is now, thanks to generative AI. If you think, and before I go there, before you think about it, with the advancement of the technology, really the technology has been in existence for years, maybe even over a decade now. But the difference is the interfacing of the technology where, like I said, my grandmother can use it, anyone can use it, someone non-technical, a small business owner can use it, a kid who's in elementary school can use it. And so it can be seen as, one, a threat because it is so accessible, and we're curious and sometimes concerned about who gets access to that technology. But if you look at it in another respect, which you have to have a balanced viewpoint, it is also a tool to level the playing field for technology and applications, whereas communities such as Black communities have always been left out. And so now literally nothing can stop people in these communities from getting hands and access to this technology. And so whenever I talk about it, I always say, be aware of the limitations, but use it to your advantage because the world isn't stopping. It isn't going anywhere. So let's learn how to use it responsibly and use it to help our everyday lives. And then with that, I'll close with how we at AWS look at responsible AI from 8 different ways. One is controllability. Can we actually control and monitor how people are using the technology and not using it in a malice way? 2, privacy and security, which has always been a concern. If you think about private data, especially anytime you're dealing with humans. 3rd is safety. How can we prevent harmful system output and misuse? 4 is fairness. We look at fairness in terms of how the performance of the technology impacts different groups. And we have some specific ways to go about educating companies and people on how to do that. There's also veracity and robustness. You have to know that the outputs of these systems aren't always factual. Do you have proper guardrails in place? How do you implement those guardrails as companies? Because every application has its own nuances. And are you intentionally testing for robustness? Are you in the terms of deploying products? Are you already anticipating some of the ways that people will misuse the product and actually testing for that? There's also explainability. We've heard that before earlier today. There's also transparency. As big companies, how are we holding ourselves accountable for areas we perform well as well as areas that we don't perform well? And are we being upfront about that with things like model cards and service cards, which we do have as well? And then lastly is governance. How do you ensure the best practices across this entire AI chain through the entire life cycle of a product, which is never ending, by the way. It never ends. You have to constantly monitor how things react in the environment and get that feedback and constantly improve, which is not trivial. So I'll leave with that, and hopefully we can delve more into this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both. That was absolutely fascinating. Haley is actually going to be rejoining via her phone, but I would like to introduce you back to the stage. Dr. Sephus, we have questions rolling in. I am going to take moderator privilege by going to the first question, and then I will definitely go to the chat as Ms. Ramsey-Jones joins us. So my first of all, thank you for that huge introduction, and also thank you for taking us kind of behind the curtain in terms of Amazon Web Services and the efforts that they are putting forth for responsible AI. This is a side event for the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. And one of the key things that this forum is focused on is making sure that anti-racism is seen as, is introduced into the human rights discourse, and our right not to be discriminated against as people of African descent is recognized by the UN. So with that in mind, I was really interested in this, in the way that you set the floor for us. Kind of number one, Amazon is sending something, interacting with the public every 4 minutes, which I had no idea, which was huge, and this was across industry. And then kind of these 8 responsible categories of AI, and specifically leveling the playing field. My question is, as people of African descent, we certainly do not want to be discriminated against in these ways. But I would love for you to speak about how we can level the playing field, not just as users in the way that your grandmother is, but in ways of actually shaping the industry also. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I've definitely, in terms of people of African descent, I often, when we're preparing tests and evaluations for products, which is what we do, we on the team that I sit on, and auditing systems, even in the community work that we do with my nonprofit Bean Path, we're always thinking about marginalized groups first, the traditionally marginalized groups. And in terms of this is such a powerful moment right now, because oftentimes, as we've said, a lot of times we've been discriminated against. We've been the last at the table. The more you have people with awareness of this, the more that we're now being put in the forefront. I think what is really interesting right now is that we're seeing industry even more interested and even more willing to advance their responsible AI principles and practices and frameworks. And with that, I believe they're now interested in contracting with more businesses and people of color, because they have that unique background. And so, for example, there's something called red teaming. And so what red teaming is literally a team that tries to break a product. They try to test it in ways that are just crazy, normally ways that myself as a developer would not think to test it. And if you think about it, we're also sourcing a lot more diverse data to evaluate these systems. And so we're intentionally looking for, diverse companies to help us do this, because, of course, I mean, as a large company, and this goes for any large company, your view is only so, far. It's very limited. And so you can, on a level of scale, significantly increase that viewpoint and perspective by inviting these companies to the table that already have this diverse perspective and are already thinking this way. And I encourage a lot of people of African descent to seize this moment, create new companies, figure out what guardrails are, figure out what red teaming is, figure out how to ethically source diverse data, and figure out a way to benefit, to let the people who are actually providing the data also benefit from this, specialize in this. This is our time. Companies are actively looking for these people to work with and engage with as partners. And I think together we can improve overall. We can reach that North Star where we feel we have, exhausted everything we possibly can to be as responsible as possible.
And I have to just underscore that. I think certainly with my work with AI for the People, we sit on a number of different advisory boards. So one of them, for example, is TikTok, where we'll do some of that red teaming work and help them think about how that product is being used by young people across the globe, but in domains such as access to democracy, even access to finance, for example, in creator economies, making sure that Black creators are protected and can engage in economic generation in places like the global majority, where they may not be a well-developed commercial sector, but folks have smartphones, they have the ability to access the internet, and through that ability, through influencer culture and others, can definitely make money, can support their families, but algorithmically, are they being downgraded by the algorithm? How are the decisions around content moderation being used? Dr. Sephus and I know each other, so I apologize as I indulge my time because I'm excited, but I don't know if you read, there was a paper that came out in 2021 by a group of computer scientists from Carnegie Mellon, which is in the United States, called Annotators with Attitude. And what that paper looked at was how computer groups that were annotating large language models for generative products were actually not tagging anti-Black speech as toxic in cases where their ideologies aligned with that, but tagging African-American vernacular, which is, for those of you watching from outside of the United States, it's a type of English that Black people specifically use, was being tagged as toxic. And that was an example, I think, for a team who are interested in rhetoric, who are interested in natural language processing, to come in and improve annotation practices. So we do have one comment, because I could honestly ask you questions all day, and you know this, and I'm not going to do that. But we do have one question, and I may mispronounce the questioner's name, so please forgive me. It comes from Philippe Skasposhnoik. Please do excuse me. I am 100% sure that I have said your name wrongly. But the statement is, hello, I'm really looking forward to this session. We're currently conducting a study to identify and understand the AI bias from different ethnicities in ophthalmology, so that's a medical field. We set out to understand why the performance in African populations is the worst and to improve the performance, especially amongst these groups. Dr. Sephus, do you have any kind of broad strokes advice on how that could be used, how AI can be less biased in biometric settings?
Yeah, so there are, as I mentioned before, there are nuances that come with each type of application and each type of use case. And so one thing that we do when we're talking to customers is we try to make sure that they very intentionally define the use cases that they are fine-tuning their system for. Because some use cases could, basically you have to pick your trade-offs. So all the different umbrella items under responsible AI, oftentimes you can't optimize for all of them at once. And so with a situation like healthcare, something in healthcare, dealing with personal identifiable information and working with humans, that is a particular use case that you want to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to privacy, safety, security, and fairness. And however, think more about your use cases and your target audiences on how you want to optimize that product. What we're seeing now is there is more to an AI product than just a single foundation model. They're often a system of hybrid models. They may be multimodal, meaning you may have some text data, you may have some speech data, you may have some image data, or even video. You're also seeing different stages of the model, of the different models in the product itself. And just remember that at every single stage, at every single touch point, you want to evaluate that for biases constantly. Again, because it's a healthcare product, you want to be extremely careful of that. Now, I also, say that governance is extremely important too, because if you have one side of the life cycle that is very, meticulous about how they train the data, how they label data, how they interact with customers and tests, where you have someone on the upstream that isn't, then your whole system can fail. And so everyone in that, ensuring that governance across every piece, again, especially because of any type of human use cases, is very important. And so I say all that to say it's a lot to be very in tune with, but we often say you can also not guarantee 100%. And we have to be honest about, how is the product operating? Are we okay with this particular percentage on this given data set for this particular use case? And that is really the goal you're trying to reach. It's never 100% across the board, because in real life, because these systems are based on statistics, it's not attainable. And we have to understand that. And if that not being attainable is a product that will harm someone, then we shouldn't be creating that product. And so just keep those things in mind. I'm hoping to give just some best practices, because again, it all depends on many things, but hopefully that kind of guides you in the right direction.
Dr. Sephus, I am never not happy that you are in industry, because I believe that as people of African descent, we should be at every table. For those who don't know, Dr. Sephus is also an extremely successful entrepreneur and has built and sold companies that with applications that actually make those companies better. So I really appreciate the advice of, if it's going to be harmful, then we need to think differently. And the other thing I'm gonna interject before I go to Haley, who, despite her electricity not being accessible, which I know many of our people that are coming in from the global majority can relate to, she's still here with us. But I do want to also put onto the table that we have to think environmentally as we think about AI also. Again, one of the most famous papers Timnit Gebru actually wrote just before leaving Google was looking at environmental impact. And we know that people living in regions that are most impacted by climate disaster are those most heavily populated by people of African descent, even when they are living in the global north. So Ms. Ramsey Ross, hopefully we can get your audio. I wanted to ask you, which I found really fascinating, was the way that you made the link between autonomous weapons in the theater of war and Black maternal health. And you really helped illuminate that by telling the story of what I think Dr. Sephus was referring to with foundational models, not just having one use case, but those use cases, sometimes the engineering from one domain is used as the basis of the engineering for another domain for another product. I was wondering whether you could speak a little bit more about how what happens on the battlefield does have civilian impacts.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry about my electricity problems. I'm hoping I'm not going to get cut out midway, so I'll just jump in there. I think, the dual uses of technology, I think, are very important to talk about. And in my presentation, I was speaking a bit around, who designs these technologies, and how are we sort of perceived through those eyes. So, the kind of the criminalization of Black and brown people, quite frankly, does seep into the imaginations of people, and then they're then reflected in these systems that not only have a military function, but as we see more and more, these technologies are then being deployed in everyday policing and, as I mentioned before, border control and protest. So when we think about the sort of target profiles and who is designing those target profiles, we need to ask ourselves who is being read as a threat and on what grounds. How are we being informed as a threat and on what grounds? We need to think about who is controlling these technologies and what do they understand and think they understand about the populations they are recognizing through these technologies. What are the politics of these relationships and the long-standing systemic forms of discrimination? It's when these systems are being designed for warfare primarily, they will end up in civil spaces. So I think that's one of the things that in my organization, we try not to look at issues from a very sort of siloed perspective. A lot of our work is with the UN, and the UN has been structured in a way that human rights are discussed over here and disarmament is discussed over there. A lot of NGOs replicate those models because many NGOs are single-based issues. We are quite fortunate in the sense that my organization works across many different fields. So as much as we're in the Human Rights Council, we're also at the First Committee in the General Assembly talking about military matters and security, peace and security. And I think because we have exposure to that, we've been able to make those linkages. Personally, I am, as you know, Mutale, I had a child 3 years ago, so I've personally taken an interest in maternity health and have been just very shocked at seeing how, just how all of these issues interlink, and that we need to be mindful as we are rolling out AI of, yes, the good that AI can do, that's really important. And as well as that, Black and brown people get to be the beneficiaries of that. And we need movements to make sure that these systems, especially as they're unregulated, for the most part, we need to be mindful of that because they are everywhere.
I really like the fact that we do have these Black-led organizations that are looking to influence both the Security Council, which would be considered hard, right? People want to, there's only a few countries that can be in that. It's the most, the richest countries. I don't want to say power in that way, because I think power can be produced in many other ways. And there are those tables too, because I think it's important that, yes, we do want human rights, but we are in these high influence fields also. And I would say even for AI for the people, we influence big academia. I'm at Cambridge University now, attending a conference around social media and access to democracy in elections, for example, as well as being a fellow at Oxford. There are going to be 2 last questions before we leave. The next one, I'm going to put you back on the spot, Ms. Ramsey-Jones, and then Dr. Sephus, we're going to end with a question from you. So this question actually comes from ITU, our illustrious host. Thank you again for this panel and for inviting a group of Black women to let you know how we are saving the world. Just saying, we love you too, brothers, but it's all women here. And the question in the comment starts, thanks for your inspiring sharings. I have a question regarding discrimination issues in AI development. I assume assembling corpus models that power AI is a societal as well as technical process. The corpus could be discriminatory, and what is more concerning is deep learning mechanisms that impose priority principles on calculation. In this case, how should governmental bodies, and this is really the question for you, Ms. Ramsey-Jones, how should governments and international organizations like ITU do work on a policy level to check these discriminatory inclinations, especially as we're thinking about generative AI?
So, I mean, I love the title of, thank you so much for your question. And that's, I mean, it makes me think of the title of your organization, Mutale, AI for the People. What I would love to see is AI being spoken about in town halls up and down the country in every single corner. I would like to see the democratization of AI. I would like to see, Dr. Sephus, you spoke about, working with young people and training. I want, in order for AI to actually be for good, we need to make sure that more people are involved in its creation at various different levels and in various different places. So I think we need to create institutions, spaces, and fund this type of work so that we can really make sure that AI is in fact used properly and can actually be for good.
I think we have just lost Haley because of her electricity issue. The only thing that I would add for that is in our policy work here in the United States, what we have advocated for consistently are for impact assessments to be integrated at the testing and evaluation stage. We are asking for explainable results, not necessarily the base data, the base code, but explainability in how these particular applications and use cases impact what we call in the United States protected classes. That does include racially minoritized populations. And in conversations we've been having with partners across the globe, specifically in India, been really interested in how those that are advocating for the rights of the Dalit people and other people of lower caste, what does that look like? Because India has one of the highest surveillance populations in the world, and that's not different to the surveillance that Black populations also face. One last question, and hopefully Haley will be here for goodbyes. Dr. Sephus elaborated on how, this is a question for Martin Dober. Dr. Sephus elaborated how important representative AI is to remove the bias from data. How can African startup companies become more visible to large Western companies, as many of them, like Izola.life in Kenya, are on the rise and develop representative, and I love this, compassionate AI technology? By the way, thank you for an engaging discussion. And I also have to thank you, Dr. Sephus, for taking all the questions at the beginning and doing it so gracefully.
Awesome. No worries. And that's a good question. One, you can reach out to me if you're interested in working with AWS. We're always looking for new companies to get contracts with. You'd be surprised how many of them are actually based in the continent of Africa. And so I think also in general, there is a big wave for a lot of the larger industry players moving in this direction. So I encourage you to reach out to people on LinkedIn, reach out to people. Now this is being talked about almost everywhere. You can't avoid it. And so continue to engage, continue to promote yourself and market yourself as a company, as a business. I recently had the opportunity to judge Forbes top 50 AI companies, and a lot of them were from all over the world, and they're not only based in creating AI models, but they're also doing AI evaluations. And so now we're recognizing companies on a larger scale that actually put this at the forefront of their business. And so I think again, the time is now. This is the movement. Who better to help these companies than people who have diverse backgrounds and have been literally living this all their lives and can contribute immensely to the conversation. And so, definitely feel free to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect.
Thank you so much. And you have definitely inspired me, not just in my current work, but one of the reasons I'm pursuing doctoral studies is to actually really think about pivoting towards evaluation and entrepreneurship in that space. So thank you, Dr. Sephus. You have always been an inspiration to me. I will definitely be reaching out, and I can tell you from personal experience, Dr. Sephus always reaches out back, despite being so busy. That is actually going to be the end of our webinar. I am so immensely grateful to Dr. Bilal for inspiring remarks at the beginning for AI for Good, the incredible work that you do. Please, if you can, you're listening to this and you can get to Geneva, May 30th to 31st, consider coming to the conference. Dr. Sephus, as always, thank you for your time. It is not lost on me that you are in the United States, so it's probably the middle of the night. And thank you. Oh my goodness, she is back. I was just saying our thank yous. Ms. Ramsey-Jones, I would thank you for your huge insights. I think really thinking about the deployment of AI technologies outside of peace settings is something that we should all be thinking about. And especially because there are Black movements across the world that stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. And we know that that is an area that they're calling the first AI war. So for listeners from South Africa and other nations that have made those remarks, we do, as an international community and as an African diasporic community, despite our personal feelings, we do see you and we do appreciate, because we did stand with South Africa during the end of apartheid also. So with that, I am going to get ready to close. The conversation could be continued at the Neural Network, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.
The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.
you.